Coming up on today's episode of The Story Detective, how to plot your novel through Save the Cat. Now this is Preptober Week 1 vlog, and I'm looking at Act 1. I'm reading this step by step, using it as a workbook. I'm not reading the whole thing and then trying to apply it to a plot that already exists. I am plotting as I go through the book, encountering it as it comes. So today we're going to look at pros, the cons, and how this book compares to other story structures such as the hero's journey or story engineering. That's what's coming up on today's episode. Stick around. I've also reached 500 subscribers, and while the numbers aren't the be-all and the end-all of me being here, if 500 people click the subscribe button, that warrants a thank you. In fact, if you're just here watching this video or have watched any of my videos, your time has value, and if you're spending some of it here, I appreciate that. I am currently looking for 10 more writing buddies for Nanowrimo next month. I want to keep the numbers at about 15 people or so, because I believe the magic happens in smaller groups where no one gets lost in a sea of voices. If this sounds like something you might enjoy, send a request to Story Detective, spelled just like my channel. All requests will be accepted on a first-come basis. So today, we're going to look at the progress that I've made using Save the Cat Writes a Novel. So far, I have to say that diving right in, there's a lot of good information in here. Now, the first chapter started off with your hero, which was great. It asked some questions about the hero in general. It gave a basis. Now, this is not a book on characterization. It is a book that gives you the bare foundation, the essentials for thinking of your character going into a story. Now, you set up your hero with 3 basic things. The first is a problem, which represents their flaws. The second is their want, which signifies an exterior goal. And thirdly is their need, which is their interior, their life lesson to be learned during the course of the story. It also talks about their inner wound, what they call the shard of glass. It's what's causing them all of their angst, all of their problems that they need to overcome. And it's important to know what that wound is. Those are important essentials to have going into any story for your character, because those are the things that they need to work out. And that exterior want is always in conflict with the interior. Conflict is built on all levels of story. If your exterior want and interior need are not the same, then you automatically have conflict within your character. And that conflict expands into their world, everything that they do, the people that they surround themselves with. All the supporting cast, including the villain, are reflections of different aspects of your hero, the good and the bad. The one thing that I have a problem with so far, leaping right into Act 1 and starting to plot your story. There is nothing in terms of characterizing your villain. I looked through this. There's absolutely nothing. Where's the villain? Where's the other half of your story? Back in 2006, Jessica Brody was struggling to sell her first novel. She reported getting constant feedback from agents and editors, all saying the same thing: great voice, no story. She had been working previously as a movie studio executive, a job which apparently gave her little education into such things. That's not surprising. Creators aren't always handing out the secrets of their craft. You have to be willing to go after it, pick their brains. Reading scripts, watching movies being made for that matter, isn't going to make structure obvious. After all, how many movies and novels have you consumed without ever seeing it? Enter Blake Snyder's original version of Save the Cat for screenwriting. The book found its way to her through a colleague who thought it might be adapted to writing a novel. Once Jessica started utilizing the 15 beats in Snyder's book, her novels began selling. And it would be just 3 short years before tragedy struck Blake Snyder. Most stories have a tangible villain. They have a person that is opposing your hero. I understand, again, this is not a book on characterization. So you need to come at this with your characters pretty firmly in hand. They're going to give you those key points for your hero, which is nice, but why stop there? Why stop at that character? Yes, your hero is your most important part of your story. Yes, the story belongs to the hero. But if you don't have a good villain, and I think this is why villains get such short shrift in books and movies. So what we're going to do today is we're going to publish the chapter that Save the Cat didn't give us. What I would recommend is going through that chapter on your hero and just using it to flesh out the same points in your villain. Because the villain believes that they're the hero of the story anyway, and you need a fully formed villain, so figure out their wants, figure out their needs, their goals within your story. Only their motives and their actions set them apart from the hero. Villains are generally the dark reflection, or the darker half of your hero. Whatever traits your hero has, whatever good points and their flaws, the villain is going to come at this in exactly the opposite. Just as your hero has that shard of glass wound that's affecting their life and preventing them from getting ahead in whatever their goal is, the villain has a different kind of shard. It's a spark of good. It may be something from a loved one, something from their past. It's something that will reflect on a bit of resentment, or maybe a life they could have once had. Fast forward to August 4th, 2009. Blake Snyder died quite suddenly and unexpectedly of what was deemed either a cardiac arrest or a pulmonary embolism. Snyder was a screenwriter as well as an author, and the popularity of Save the Cat also made him an educator as well as a consultant. He led international seminars and workshops, and consulted with some of the biggest studios in Hollywood. The Writers Guild of America held a public memorial for Snyder on September 29th. However, his work didn't stop there. The torch, or rather, the cat, was about to be passed. One of the videos by the Nihilist Geek, he did a video on Magneto, and he mentioned a story where Kitty Pryde was injured. Magneto, being a Holocaust survivor, saw his parents being put in the gas chamber by Nazis. So he has a very strong motivation, even though his motives have been twisted over time. When Kitty Pryde, and it was when she first joined the X-Men, so she was like 13 years old or something. When that child got hurt, whatever was going on with Magneto, it just stopped him in his tracks. Whatever battle was going on that day with the X-Men, whatever he was fighting for, and he was done. I mean, he just left. It was an interesting ending, a very different kind of ending, because that spark of good stopped him. The war may still go on. Can he really do it without murdering innocent people? This is an interesting example of how that past spark of good, empathy, that resentment towards whatever it is that got in his way, that made him the villain that he is still plaguing him. That spark is there like a little spike in his subconscious saying, look what you're doing. Is this what you really want to do? And I think the best villains have that little spark that gets in the way. They may look past it, but the fact that it's there will humanize your villain. By 2016, Jessica Brody had sold 15 novels, giving the credit of her decade-long success to the principles outlined in Snyder's book. Her sales were to major publishers, Simon & Schuster, Macmillan, and Random House, which have been translated in more than 23 countries. She has also carried on Snyder's work of teaching other writers these techniques. By this time, Brody had been talking for over 2 years with Blake Snyder Enterprises about drafting her own installment for the Save the Cat series. And in 2016, on her blog, she announced Save the Cat writes a novel sold to 10-Speed Press, a division of Crown Random House. The book was slated for publication in 2018, and yet, Jessica Brody was not the only author to whom the cat was passed. Your villain's wants are opposing your hero's needs. They are, from a psychological aspect, it's like when two people meet on a subconscious level. Even though they don't know one another that well, they may not like one another. They will kind of sense that they are the type of person that caused that wound, or that type of person that exacerbates that little spark within their consciousness that says, hey, what are you doing? So if you can think of whatever your hero's flaws, whatever your hero's goals are, put them in opposition of whatever your villain represents, because they are going to oppose and antagonize one another throughout your story. And this is for a reason. It's not just because they're vying for the same job at the company. It's because on some deep gut and mental psychological level, these two are the other side of the same coin. They may not like the other side of the coin or that reflection in the mirror, but it's there, and it's going to antagonize, and it's going to put them in a crucible, because once that story starts, your hero and villain, neither one is going to back down. If it was just a position and there wasn't that psychological connection, would they be willing to do what they do? Would the hero be willing to put his life on the line for just any cause? It has to be an important cause. And your villain has to feel it's just as important to them. And those things that are exacerbating one another are going to come into play, and it's going to make your story interesting to watch. The entire Save the Cat library currently fills 6 volumes. The first 4 were penned by Snyder himself. Save the Cat, the last book on screenwriting you'll ever need. The second was Save the Cat Goes to the Movies, the screenwriter's guide to every story ever told, and it analyzed 50 films using Snyder's beats. Number 3, Save the Cat Strikes Back, more trouble for screenwriters to get into and out of, with tips inspired and questions answered from workshops and his lectures. Number 4, Save the Cat, Blake's Blogs, a compilation of blogs and other writings on the subject of screenwriting. Number 5, Save the Cat Goes to the Indies, by Salva Rubio, a screenwriter and novelist. This was published in 2017, a year before Jessica Brody's edition. Rubio's book analyzed 50 indie and European cult films. Number 6, Save the Cat writes a novel by Jessica Brody, of which we are currently discussing. Will there be more books forthcoming in the series? Only the cat knows for sure, and he's holding his tongue until further notice. While your hero may sacrifice themselves for the many, the villain may sacrifice the many for their own selfish gain, or maybe sacrifice the many for the few. While the hero may want to save the world, the villain may want to destroy millions of people and just keep a few and start humanity over again, because in their warped brain that may seem like a very logical way to fix our broken system within humanity and the world by starting it over again. Only when they start over again, your villain is going to be in charge. He's there, he's going to guide him, he's going to rule it, and that's going to make things better because we're not going to have those problems again, right? If you think that's silly or comic bookish, just look at history, because we've done that to entire cultures. If they pose a threat to what we feel is holding our fragile system together, many times we have tried genocide to wipe people out that we've considered to be a threat on some level. So if you take that and blow it out in your villain, from a psychological aspect, if they have enough control, enough power, people can do the worst things. And the acts of humanity upon humanity have been worse than anything that any other creature on the planet can dream of. There was a psychology book, and I can't remember who wrote it. The quote was, when we think of terrible acts that people do to one another, we consider them to be bestial. But there's no beast or thing on the planet that does to its own kind what humans do to one another. Keeping this in mind when you write your villain may be a bit disturbing. They're called villains for a reason, and it may help you to motivate your villain to understand to some degree enough to write them credibly. And that is essentially the missing chapter that should have been chapter 2 in Save the Cat, because going into your story without having that opposition, I think, is a fundamental and a foundational mistake.